We're on the same. When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous. Thinking about the past, thinking about the future.
All right, we're back, everybody. We're here. We're at the Draftvice Studios in Universal Studios, Florida. That's not really a thing, but, well, Universal Studios is. I just am not at Draftvice Studios. That's not a thing. But in Draftvice Studios, we are doing a thing, and we're talking about the drafts, and we're talking about today the Houston Texans and Billy O'Brien and the Minnesota Vikings. But first, we're going to talk about Billy O'Brien and the Houston Texans at the Houston Texans Horror Show. Yep, that's right. Deshaun Watson's got a front row seat to this delightful amalgamation of pretty decent coaching and weird, but maybe a little bit overly blown. Let me put it this way, right? All right, so I think it's a little overblown, all the moves that Bill O'Brien's made, right? He traded away DeAndre Hopkins. Okay, DeAndre Hopkins is a next level talent at receiver, right? He is just amazing. But it's possible that you might not value that kind of talent at receiver if you have potential weapons that do other things. I don't agree with this method, by the way. I'm just saying it's not as much of a shit show as people make it sound. Now, it looks like a shit show sometimes, and potentially kind of like it's still very questionable decision making, right? Bill O'Brien, you're probably not supposed to be the GM there. You probably should hire somebody, but nobody wants to come work with you because you don't have any first-round picks for like the next millennia, and no second-round pick next year either. So, but like, let's move past it, right? We'll go ahead and we'll focus on the individual moves and the draft, right? Because those are important, right? So they trade away DeAndre Hopkins, they get an extra second-round pick, and they get David Johnson, right? Former star running back of the Arizona Cardinals. And, all right, that's kind of interesting. Depends on what you get out of David Johnson to see how much this deal really works. Because what happens is they had that Cardinals number 40 overall pick. They also had their own second-round pick, which they traded for Brandon Cooks, right? They traded for him from Los Angeles Rams, right? He's a fast guy. He's got a whole different speed level. Now you got him. You got Will Fuller. You got Kenny Stills. You got a fast receiving core, man. That is fast. That's light speed fast. As I put it before, that is light speed rescue fast. Now Deshaun Watson's a Power Ranger. You're kicking butt. They're going to get a Megazord in there soon. They already did. They paid him. His name is Laramie Tunsil. Yeah, they got all the power in the world. So while Bill O'Brien seems like a little bit of a weirdo here. And yes, Brandon Cooks has had some concussion issues. You do worry about that. The contract is still substantially less, and it's a lot less when you consider that DeAndre Hopkins wanted an extension that would have paid him somewhere in the realm of $18 to $20 million, right? And you had him under contract, and there's some argument that, hey, you know what, you have him under contract anyway at $14 million. Even if you wanted a new contract, you have the power here, right? You have the ability to fine him or do what you want with him. He doesn't have the ability to hold out. So I get that. But if you're sitting there saying, listen, either way, we're going to probably have to, in the next year or two, sign him to an extension, and they feel like they were getting value. I don't think this is enough value. I will say this. I do think Bill O'Brien's bad at getting value out of trades. It feels like the one part of his deals that really fall through. He traded a conditional 4th to 3rd rounder last year for Duke Johnson, a guy who probably would not have gone for a 3rd rounder for anybody else last year. He traded away 2 first-round picks and a 2nd-round pick for Laramie Tunsil. I mean, I'm sure Deshaun Watson's happy about Laramie Tunsil, but that's a lot to spend on a tackle, especially when you look at this year's draft where people were drafting tackles left and right. Nonetheless, right? So let's look into their draft. I actually thought, the maneuver was good. We'll talk a little bit more about those trades and the effect on the team. No longer having Hopkins. Now you got David Johnson and Brandon Cooks. But let's talk about the draft, right? That's what we're here for. We're here for some draft talk. And they didn't have a first-round pick because, that was about, I would say, like 40% or 45% Laramie Tunsil, right? So because it was 2 first rounders and a second rounder, that's about that's a lot of draft capital for one player. So this year it was the first rounder they had to pay up on. So they had a second round pick at pick 40, the Arizona Cardinals' original pick, and they took Ross Blacklock at a TCU. They made a big deal that he came in to visit. They got him in front of the full coaching staff, that he was really impressive. I think there was something to Bill O'Brien's mindset. I heard this before when he drafted Deshaun Watson, where he got to be in a room with Deshaun Watson. He really got to know the guy, and there was a different. I think the Brock Osweiler thing, where he only spent 5 minutes on the phone with him or in a room with him, kind of left him scarred. So he went from Brock Osweiler, which kind of screwed him over. It was maybe one of the worst years of his career, to Deshaun Watson, who, if you look at that whole draft process and how it turned out for them, became a real star for them. So I think Bill O'Brien really does prefer getting to know these guys before they are on his team. It makes sense. It's a very appreciative idea. And he probably would make a big deal of not getting to know somebody only through Zoom and phone calls. Ross Blacklock's a good player, decent defensive lineman, not the biggest D lineman, but he's going to get a little bit of push up the middle. Probably not going to be replacing the nose tackle that they lost in DJ Reader, who left in free agency. Probably going to be on the other side by not next to J.J. Watt, but kind of the 3-tech role, but it's not really the 3-tech role. Sometimes those guys line up in different spots. They needed to add pieces that D-line. They needed somebody opposite of J.J. Watt. They lost pieces. They need to kind of keep on, filling out that roster. And I honestly think that Blackhawk was a decent pick. Very athletic guy. Kind of a little bit lighter, though, like only about 289. So he's not, you're not expecting him to play nose or anything like that. They also took Jonathan Gennard from Florida, studied him a lot. They said he brings toughness and football intelligence. He's going to get to work. This is another guy they spent time with. They made a big deal about him spending time with them. He 1 year at Florida in that program. He was able to get a big part of that experience was his journey as well. They see him. Bill O'Brien said he saw him playing more as an outside linebacker, but could also play 5 technique, which is right over the tackle shoulder. So a defense, like basically J.J. Watt's role, D-end kind of deal. And in sub packages, you can kind of move them all over the front, depending on if you're playing an odd or an even. So their day 2 picks were okay. There was a little bit of rumors that there was some frustration with the Grenard pick because they were supposedly trying to trade with the Lions and just didn't go through. Either way, those 2 guys, you could see what they're working on. They're working on building up the defense. I feel like Blacklock's a little bit of a needle mover. I don't feel like Grenard is a big needle mover. I think there were other guys there I would have had, but decent enough. You take your shots in the draft. You're now, in the 3rd round because you don't have a 1st round pick, and it felt like it was a little bit of a reach, if you will. 4th round, they took Charlie Heck out of UNC. His dad's a coach. They mentioned that. They liked him. They targeted him for that spot. They're attacking the offensive line. They think he'll play tackle for them, actually, which I was a little bit shocked by because, again, like certain people have guys at different spots. Even if they played tackle in college, they aren't always playing tackle in the NFL. But he's going to probably play a swing tackle role for them initially. Then the 4th round, they had 2 4th-round picks. They went ahead and drafted John Reed out of Penn State, right? They said he could play both outside and in the slot. Good quickness, good toughness. Known for him. Penn State. He was a sophomore. Came into their. Bill O'Brien knows him. Like he met him before. He got to meet him when he was at Penn State. He was a sophomore. Came to the camp. He's a smart guy. Comes from a great family. So they were very intrigued by him. They like this guy. They need to add to their cornerback core. We're going to talk about it later. They got Gary and Conley there, who they did not pick up his 5th-year option. They got, I think they re-signed Vernon Hargraves, former Tampa Bay Buccaneer, who was a 1st-round pick, and they cut him, so they didn't have to pay him the whole contract on that, and then re-signed him to a cheaper deal. So their cornerback core is very light. The biggest pieces on there, Gary and Conley and Roby and Vernon Hargraves. So you're looking to get some real play out of these mid-round picks. So again, if Roby gets injured or you want to move on from Roby, even though you just extended him for a 3-year deal, it gives you an opportunity to fill out that core. Like I said, he could also play outside. Yeah, you're not really totally sold on Hargrave or Conley, apparently. So, again, make some competition for the cornerback spot on your roster. This is a good move. I like what they did here. And Penn State guys typically are very athletically inclined. And, Bill O'Brien has a very good familiarity with Penn State, formerly being a coach there. Round 5, they took Isaiah Coulter out of Rhode Island. And that was actually really the extent of their draft. They feel good about the defense. They have DBs that are versatile. They didn't get a real guard there. They feel good about their offensive line and their depth there. It was very uninspiring of a draft because they don't have picks. Like, this is what happens. You trade away all your picks. I really can't talk about too much of your offense. I can't really talk too much about the guys you drafted, because you didn't have a first-round pick, right? You didn't have the star player. You got one guy who's relatively pretty good, but none of these guys, I think, are true impact guys. Unless you have guys that fall for particular reasons, like injury or red flags, or you trade up, or you get something for a player. You trade, like, they did not get that this year. I'm sorry, but the Texans draft was kind of very unflavorful, if you will. And listen, it was unflavorful, but then you look at what's going on with the rest of this team, right? So let's talk about some of the other offseason moves, right? They released Tashawn Gibson, who's the safety. They declined Gary and Conley's 5th-year option, but he's still going to be there this year. They extended Laramie Tunsil, 3-year, $66 million deal. Holy bananas. Wow, you paid a lot, right? Considering, like, let me put it this way. I'm a Browns fan. We signed Jack Conklin to a 3-year deal, and his 3-year deal was 3 years, and it was $14 million a year. You're paying $8 million more for Laramie Tunsil, everybody. That is a lot. I'm not quite sure it's that much of a differential between those two. There's a differential, don't get me wrong, plus the sides that they play, but still, that's a really big amount. They trade away DeAndre Hopkins, like I said before. They traded for Brandon Cooks and David Johnson. They signed the one big signing, or the two big signings they had. They signed Timmy Jernigan, formerly of the Eagles. They didn't really have any real big signings. They lost DJ Reader. Now they get Timmy Jernigan in. He's going to play somewhere on that defensive line, maybe play nose. Bigger dude. He's used to being. I know when he was playing for the Eagles, he was playing in a 4-3. This is a little bit different of a situation, but they play multiple fronts down in for the Texans. They also signed safety Eric Murray, formerly of the Browns, and I believe also the Chiefs. Which is weird because he hasn't played almost in 2 years. Like, he did not play at all last year. He was basically he was a safety that they traded Emmanuel Ogba for and did not play at all. So I'm a little shocked that Eric Murray was signed to a 3-year, $20 million deal, but I'm guessing a lot of that's not guaranteed. Still, that's a lot of money to sign a safety who barely played in the last year. But, hey, you know what? You lose some, you live some. Like I said before, they extended Bradley Roby. Lamar Miller's out. Jonathan Joseph's out. Carlos Hyde is out. They did re-sign Darren Fells, the tight end, who Deshaun Watson showed very good rapport with. And like I said before, if you're giving Deshaun Watson all the weapons in the world, this is like one of those things you build on your strength. Your strength here is offense. Okay, we're going to throw pieces around at corner. We're going to throw pieces around at pass rush, and we're going to try and just build around a couple of core guys on defense: Whitney Merciless, J.J. Watt, and guys who we've drafted and hopefully will develop. And then on offense, you look at what they got on offense. It's quite an impressive offense, right? You got Deshaun Watson, right? You have Brandon Cooks. You got Will Fuller. You got what's his name? Kenny Stills, Kiki QT. He was coming on last year. They signed Randall Cobb in free agency. They still have Darren Fells. I heard a lot of talk. It was funny. There was the other day a big draft analyst, John Ledger, had put up a post about guys who you think are above average players on your roster, and somebody had posted a thing about the Texans. And then there was a big discussion about Jordan Akins and who of these guys on this roster are above average. Akins is okay. He's not. I would consider him a league average player. Yeah, good run after catch ability. They seem to be getting a little bit of production out of him, but I would not, from my current standings, say that he's this super plus player because it has not happened yet. You might see a high uplook for the guy. I think Darren Fells is literally the league definition of average tight end, which is good because you can get usage out of a league average tight end. There's not a lot of those out there, believe it or not. It's a strange thing to say he's the average of a tight end. But their offensive line is strange, right? They feel pretty good about Zach Fulton, their right guard, which I thought was a little shocking because I like Laramie Tunsil, but the rest of this offensive line's a little questionable. They got Max Sharping. They got Titus Howard, who they're hoping to play right tackle or guard still. Sharping's another guy who they drafted to play on the offensive line a year ago. Nick Martin's been the only other guy outside of Tunsil that I've kind of liked on the field. His brother, Zach Martin from the Cowboys. So family blood, interior offensive line. Again, the offense has a lot of good pieces to it, right? They got A.J. McCarron playing backup. Yippee-ki-yay. David Johnson and Duke Johnson, the DJ brothers, right? Two DJs walk into a room and they're gonna blow it off the lid. Everybody, they're gonna bring down the house. And both of them have very similar ability. David Johnson's a lot bigger, a lot stronger, a lot used to be fast. I don't know what happened to him. Injuries, if you will. I don't think he really fit what Arizona wanted to do, but there was definitely injury concern, and there was definitely a few games last year where it looked like he was running in slow motion, which was not the case, though, because everybody else was running at correct speeds, so maybe he was just not doing well. Like, maybe he had got re-injured, and, now you were hoping that he's going to take the step forward, right? He's going to go ahead and be back. Now, I am very intrigued with a roster that has Duke Johnson and David Johnson, because both these guys are pretty good receivers out of the backfield. And you can utilize two running back sets, kind of split everybody out. I really like the concept of that. I have no idea if Bill O'Brien's doing that, everybody, but I would love that idea. Like, you could have them both in the backfield, do a two running back set. You could have one line up in the slot, have one move in motion. You would have such a fun little, gadgety kind of offense. I love building around those two kind of players. We just don't know if that's really in what Bill O'Brien's planning or if it's just like, you know what, we have these two guys and we're going to just run our offense. But, I do think the speed on this offense is definitely something to talk about. If Will Fuller's healthy, which never seems to be the case, you got a lot of speed there. Brandon Cooks is a very fast guy. You could throw it to him 5 yards away from the line of scrimmage and he can take it to the house. And then he's also a deep field threat. Very good at tracking the ball. He is again, if he's healthy, and he's relatively been very good at staying healthy, he's only missed a couple of games over the few years. Even though he's had multiple injuries stack up, I think the worry is he's had multiple injuries stack up. He's had multiple concussions. So you get a concussion this year, how long is it going to keep you out? Kenny Stills, another deep field stretcher, speed threat. And then Kiki QT's kind of more of the slot kind of guy. Run after catch, dude. And it's kind of the same thing with Randall Cobb. They got a lot of similar guys on this roster. It's usually it's two flavors at least. Like there's some teams that they only went for one flavor of receiver, and sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not good. Depends on the flavor. Here the flavors are two or three good run after the catch guys and a bunch of really fast dudes. And I kind of like that mixture. That's kind of what you should be looking for in your roster building. It's decent construction. Knock all you want on Billy O'Brien and the Rocky Horror Picture Show here. I don't think I hate the construction here. I think he's got an idea, a vision of what he wants to do. The problem is, if it all falls apart, wow, is it going to look ugly? And it's going to look ugly on his face, and it's going to hurt that whole franchise. Because, again, you don't have a lot of assets. And I think the way it gets really ugly is we've seen Deshaun Watson, knock on wood, get hurt. Hopefully that does not happen again, but he takes a lot of hits. He gets hit by the blitz a lot. This is a guy's he's been hit a lot. Even when he's had good pass pro, he's gotten hit a lot. He holds the ball. He holds it long, and now he doesn't have his go-to target in DeAndre Hopkins. That's my issue with the trade, right? With DeAndre Hopkins getting traded, is you no longer have that guy who is your go-to receiver, who you target when you are in your deepest, dire straits. And that was the kind of guy that Deshaun Watson's been known to throw to. In college, he had Mike Williams, again, another big guy, throw the ball up to him, 50-50 ball, perfect for it. He had two of those guys. Most quarterbacks do not get two of those really good 50-50 deep ball, contested catch receivers. He had two. Now he's got a different type of receiving core. Nobody who's truly a big red zone threat. I think that's kind of a little bit of worry. The big red zone threat here is Darren Fells, Jordan Akins, the tight ends. So I think this is going to be an intriguing offense. I really can't wait to see it. I don't know, again, and we all know if basically if they don't have Deshaun Watson, they're screwed. Let's move to the defense, right? They got they lost DJ Reader. They managed to get Timmy Jernigan. They have Charles Omenihu, who's going to be probably playing like right defensive end. He's going to probably play end for them. I actually kind of like Omenihu. I liked him last year. He kind of showed a little bit. He came out of the draft, I think, 2 years ago. Showed pretty good as a pass rusher. I really like the player. J.J. Watt, again, another guy who's been there a long time, star player, and just seems kind of unblockable. They might have a nose tackle on the roster in Brandon Dunn. I don't really have much information on him as far as how much I've watched of him, just because, guys cycle out when you have really good guys. So they might feel really good about Robert Dunn and Omenihu and Blacklock. And, they signed Jernigan for a relatively cheap deal as well. So all these pieces, they might say, you know what, we feel okay with this, right? We can walk in on game day and make these six guys turn into something. They still have Whitney Merciless. That's kind of like their star move piece as far as pass rusher goes. Like they have Watt on the D-line. And as long as they have him and Merciless, they have something going for them. They got Zach Cunningham, like kind of hammering the middle of everything. They got Bernard McKinney as well as a linebacker. Brandon Scarlett, who's going to be again another little like their corner room's going to be a little bit meh, right? Brandon Scarlett, Gary Conley, Bradley Roby, Vernon Hargraves, Lonnie Johnson, right? That's a guy I'm more intrigued by. He came on a little bit, a little bit last year. You're hoping he's going to develop into something. Justin Reed's another guy who I'm very high on. I remember when he came out of the draft, he's been very good for them at free safety. So I like Justin Reed, Lonnie Johnson Jr. You're hoping now in his second year he's developed a little bit, and he's going to compete for a spot as far as at corner. You really do hope he's developed to the point where he can be one of those spots at corner. You're hoping he's going to replace Gary and Conley or Vernon Hargraves, who are guys who really just haven't been able to stick to where they should be. Outside of that, though, like, again, I like how they're attacking it. Like, there's actually a vision to this, right? They're saying, we have an idea what we want to do. We want to go Need for Speed, Most Wanted, Light Speed Rescue, Deshaun Watson, you're going to be the Red Ranger, go. And you're going to have all your guys with you. And on defense, we are going to try to make basically a big house of scary of what we have, and throw, the mummies out of the closet and Meatloaf and whoever we can up the middle. So that's a lot of word salad and mixed jargon there. Basically what I'm saying is, offense, we feel like we are okay with. I feel like if I had to walk in, I think a lot of good OCs could probably design a good offense with this offensive roster. Defensively, I'm a little bit more worried, but there's a lot of cool, interesting pieces there. So let's move on, right? Because last little thought on their team. They're going into 2020. They're playing in the AFC South. They got the Titans and the Colts to compete with, but it's still a very weird, wishy-washy division. You don't really feel like there's any particular dominant team because everybody's kind of got their warts. And then again, the Jaguars are basically out to lunch trying to tank for Trevor Lawrence. So I feel like, again, they got a shot to make it to the playoffs this year. They have a shot to win against anybody because they find ways of, again, Billy O'Brien's made it to the playoffs multiple years before he even had Deshaun Watson. He's constantly had a winning record. So, listen, I think this is a good I think it's actually a relatively good team. I just don't think they're getting better. The problem is you're either getting better or you're getting worse. And I don't think they got better, so they are getting worse. So it might not be this year. They might make it to the playoffs this year, but I think in the long run, that ticket's going to hit you in the behind. Let's move on to the Minnesota Vikings. Who man on the Minnesota Vikings? Boop, 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 bop, bop, bop. All right. So let's move on to the Minnesota Vikings. They had an intriguing offseason themselves. A lot of players picked in this draft. Holy bananas! Good thing I found a way to talk 25 minutes about the Texans. I probably was better off not doing that because I got a lot to talk about with the Minnesota Vikings. So let's talk about the Minnesota Vikings. All right, they right off the bat, they trade Stephon Diggs. He seemed to not be long for that roster this year. He did not care much for it. They lost Kevin Stefanski. They got rid of their D coordinator. They rose 2 guys to the ranks. One of them Zimmer's son. That's not really here nor there. But they have 2, I think, guys co-D coordinating. They also offensively now they have Gary Kubiak running things, right? The great Gary Kubiak, Super Bowl winning head coach, now offensive coordinator, because basically he's just like, my heart can't take it no more. I can't be a head coach, but I love to coordinate, mother. I love to coordinate. Let's coordinate some stuff, and he does it. He does it really well. He's got a son there. He's the QB coach, so they're gonna father-son tandem, work at it. And it's going to be that Shanahan outside zone system, right? And it was the same thing Stefanski was running. Stefanski was the guy who got Kubiak to come in as an offensive advisor last year. So now they're going to stay focused to keeping that offense there. So they got rid of Stephon Diggs. They got an extra first rounder, an extra fourth rounder, an extra fifth rounder out of that trade, right? They had 2 first-round picks, that means. First-round pick, they take Justin Jefferson at LSU, right? This is a guy who a lot of people were talking very high on going into the draft. Some people thought he would go much higher. I thought he kind of went appropriately where he should. I actually might have taken a totally different receiver at that spot, but it depends on what fits your scheme. My problem is when I watched his tape, he pretty much is the exact same as a receiver also on their roster named Adam Thielen. That's not bad, right? That's a kind of a good comp to have. Adam Thielen's a good comp. The problem is when you have 2 Adam Thielens and no different flavor there, teams can figure out how to kind of stop you, right? When you have 2 guys who have very similar style. Now, maybe you might say, well, I don't know. Those 2 style, and maybe it's a style that works very well. Like, for instance, you have 5 guys who run really fast downfield. That's a style you kind of like. Thielen and Jefferson are both very good route runners, very quick, sharp route runners, right? There's even flavor. There's different styles to even route running that people have to kind of adjust to. And Thielen and Justin Jefferson are the quick, jukey kind of Edelman-y, kind of almost kind of look like they're just making a 90-degree cut every time they do it. Very good lateral movement and very good change of direction. And they sell their routes really well, and they just it looks beautiful. Like you even see it, and it looks wow. He just went he just went on a 90-degree angle that way. What the hell happened? And there's some guys who route run like that. That's great. It's not how Diggs route runs. Diggs is a little bit more of a subtle route runner. Very smooth, kind of gliding route running. Is kind of how I would call it. The only way I could really describe the way Diggs route runs, because and this is why you have to kind of get used to the flavors of receiver, especially as you talk about things like route running and the ability, and their catch. There's just different ways that guys win. Both these guys win very much the same. Also, Thielen generally has been the inside receiver there, the slot receiver, although he kind of got a start there on the outside. And then he got kicked in, and Diggs got pushed to the outside. So I think Thielen will be back on the outside. Both guys can play. Again, you can move guys around anyway, right? As long as you're, but typically both these guys are either slot or flanker kind of receivers. They're not usually a split end. You usually want the one guy who can beat guys off the line of scrimmage, especially having more ways to go. And you could still get pressed at the line of scrimmage if you're at a flanker, or even if you're in the slot, you can technically get pressed. You just have more ability to get off. You have a little bit more space to work. Both these guys, like I said before, very similar. Justin Jefferson's kind of a go-up-and-get-it kind of guy. Like I said, very good route running, but he was not good on the outside in college, right? That's why they stuck him in the slot all the time. It wasn't just because Jamar Chase was the most amazing guy ever. They've played him at outside receiver before in college at LSU, and he did not have a lot of success doing that. Now, it doesn't mean he can't get better at it, but it is one of the big question marks with him. I think he's still a good receiver. One of the things I did like about him, he has great hands. Again, a lot like Adam Thielen, great hands, and actually a little bit more vertical ability than Adam Thielen, right? So he might be a little bit better at the going up and get it, going above a defensive back, the contested catch portion of the cinematic experience of being a football player, of being a receiver. So I like Justin Jefferson. I think this was right. I spent a lot of time talking about Justin Jefferson and I didn't even talk about what they think about him. They liked him because he played an NFL style of offense coming out of LSU. That's like a high caliber winning team. Now, to me, I always kind of put this in: was he the driver of the team or was he the passenger? And I felt like he was more of a passenger on that team. Like, he was a part of it, but he was definitely not he was not the truck. He was not driving it forward. He was a part of it. He was a piece. Not necessarily the reason, but part of it. Kind of a weird thing to say, right? Rick Spielman mentioned how quick he was, precise route runner, fits the scheme. Kubiak really liked him, and he could play deep out of the slot, which is kind of an intriguing thing. Like, there's usually a couple of different ways that you have utilization of your slot receivers. You can have them run a crossing route. You can have them run a deep post. Like, you can have them run different. And they said, listen, this guy could run the whole route tree out of the slot, which is fine. Like, that does happen. I think there's where you line a guy up, though, you kind of want. I think this is what they were looking for. He was good. They had him pretty high on their board. They feel like he's very versatile. He could play all the positions. I'm not entirely sure I agree with that, but again, I think he's a good player. I think he is good. I think you can do a lot with him. I'm just a little bit more skeptical about his full ability in the NFL, and I will be proven wrong next year, I bet. Regardless, let's move on from him. I think I spent 5 minutes talking about Justin Jefferson alone. Let's move on to Jeff Gladney, right? They're both very happy they got Jeff Gladney. Both Zimmer and Rick Spielman. They needed a corner. They lost a bunch of guys in free agency. Mackenzie Alexander left. Trey Waynes left. They cut Xavier Rhodes. And if you're wondering why they cut Xavier Rhodes, well, you must have not watched how Xavier Rhodes played last year. So they actually had a lot of holes on their roster. They got rid of a lot of guys. I didn't even talk about this as we came into this. I was going to wait till later. But they got rid of Xavier Rhodes. They cut Linval Joseph. They lost Mackenzie Alexander. They lost Trey Waynes. They also lost Everson Griffin. He opted out of his contract because he had a special clause in there. It was the Santa Claus. His wife actually required him to come back to the North Pole. So, so Zimmer really likes Jeff Gladney. This is a guy who's, they have Holton Hill on the roster. They have Mike Hughes, and then a couple of other guys who are not as big names or have gotten a lot of playing time. They feel really good at the two guys they already have on, but they definitely need to fill out the roster. So what do? Pick 31 after they've traded back a little bit. They took Jeff Gladney out of TCU. He's not really tall. He's about 5'10", but he's long, he's strong, he's tough. Zimmer and Spielman are like, this guy's got an edge to him. He played in a complex defense. He's a smart player. You're going to like playing. They talked to his coaches, Gary Patterson. He did have some issues where they said he was sometimes a little too competitive. Kind of got into a fight with Mims at Baylor. And in fact, Spielman mentioned that he even went to that game and watched that game where he was going up against Mims, a much bigger receiver, and Gladney was just giving him the business, and apparently it ended up in a little bit of an altercation, if you will. Again, unique kind of arm length and wingspan, and he's very good athlete. They really like what they can get out of him. He could play inside, he could play outside. I think this is a perfect pick for them. This is what they needed. You probably could have mock drafted it yourself, and you would have picked Jeff Gladney for them every dang time because he kind of fit what they were looking for. And like I said, if you saw their roster, they were definitely going corner into this draft, and they went corner going into this draft. Round 2 comes along, right? Now they've taken wide receiver and they've taken corner. What else would you expect the Minnesota Vikings to take? Offensive line, clearly, right? And they take Ezra Cleveland, right? Not out of Cleveland, out of Boise State. And, he fits the athletic profile, what they want to get. I watched his tape. He is a very good athlete. He does need to kind of bulk up a little bit, kind of get a little bit more core strength, if you will. A very good movement guy. I feel like there were other guys. I wasn't as high on him as some people were coming into the draft, but where they took him at the end of the second round, this was a very good spot to get him. They did this before. This is the other thing. When you see them do it before, they did this with Brian O'Neill, who came out of the draft a year or two ago and has now developed into being their right tackle. So now they're going like, listen, we did this before with Brian O'Neill. Let's do this with Ezra Cleveland. If we have these two guys, both who fit very much what Gary Kubiak likes to do, this very big movement style offense, a lot of outside wide zone. These guys are good in space. Get them moving, get them blocking. He's not a very powerful run blocker though. So you're going to have to get him again to play a little bit more strong, get a little bit more core strength to him. And I think their idea is, listen, we're going to let this guy develop here. We do have guys on the roster, so but the idea is this guy can be the future of our left tackle position. So, he's good in space. He's a clean kid, good health, good character, fits the scheme a lot. So, I like the pick. Again, they did this before with Brian O'Neill. Now you got Ezra Cleveland. Hopefully those guys will be your bookends. And Brian O'Neill's turned out really well. Now they no longer have Tony Sparano, who maybe he wasn't there when they drafted Brian O'Neill. So I don't know. Round 3, right? Cam Dantzler, Mississippi State. 6'2", 190, big dude. Big frame. The whole reason why he fell this far was because his combine was not very pretty. Was not a very good combine, but he's for a really tall guy. They said he can transition well, can drop his weight really well, and he's really good in the run game. You saw him play LSU, Alabama games. He rose to the occasion against NFL level caliber receivers. And, Zimmerman was just like, dude, he's a long, tall guy with a unique skill set. We like this kind of player. We needed some depth at our corner position as far as this roster goes. And, again, they get another guy to fill out that roster. Now you get 2 corners, right? Gladney and Dantzler. And Dantzler was a guy who a lot of people were talking really highly of before his combine profile kind of started looking a little not so great. They also, then you go to round 4, right? Now, day 3, they had a lot of picks, right? They went from day 2 to day 3, they had 3 4th-round picks, 2 5th-rounders, a few 6th-rounders. Like, it was a lot of picks, everybody. So we're going to try and burn through all of them. They took edge DJ Wonnum out of South Carolina in round 4. That was their first 4th-round pick. This was Andre Peterson's pet cat, they were saying, need to get him to reach his highlight reel tape. So this guy was a very big highlight reel guy. But their D-line coach stood on the table for him, said he has great length, great athlete, but he's very raw. That was always the problem with him. So they like him. Then they took another edge guy, James Lynch out of Baylor, right? Matt Rule's buddy. Everybody thought Matt Rule was going to take this guy like 2nd, 3rd round. Lynch was, they really liked Lynch after his meetings and the combine, and he's a good attitude. He had 13.5 sacks last year at Baylor, and it wasn't in an advantageous spot for sacks. Like he was playing in a kind of a rough position, kind of got washed out, kind of playing more of a 3-4 end, so he wasn't in the best position to get sacks. But they love him, man. Rick Spielman was like, this guy is a bowling ball of butcher knives, man. He's going to be a headache for other offensive lines. Hopefully not our offensive line, just in practice. Then their last 4th-round pick, they took Troy Dye out of Oregon, right? They liked his size, linebacker. This was Adam Zimmer's pet cat. This is the guy who he kind of dug, right? He's a good special teams player. He's going to move into some roles. Adam Zimmer really liked him, so they were going to take him. His brother, Tony Dye, played in Cincinnati with Zimmer. Rick Spielman said this guy's like a tall, linear athlete. So Dye is going to be, maybe, you got to realize they have Kendricks. They have, we'll talk about their linebacking core, but they have, Kendricks came on and played really well last year. They also have Barr, who, again, almost left them last year and then came back, said bye-bye to the Jets and said, I'm not doing that deal. I'm going back to the Vikings. So they're not really pushed for linebacker, but it's good to get depth in there. So you look at some of these guys, you go, okay, like, can I get this guy? He can play special teams. That's kind of what they're looking for. Get a little bit better on special teams as well. Round 5, they took Harrison Hand out of Temple. This guy has the ability to play outside and in nickel. Again, now you're just kind of building up more depth and some competition for that roster spot. So they could fill out their corner room. They came into this draft, I think they came into day 3 with, 60 guys on the roster. That was just after day 2, they only had 60 guys on the roster. So they went into day 3 going, like, we need to get a lot of guys. And, just the UDFA market might not be the only way we're going to go ahead and do it. So they took KJ Osborne out of Miami, Florida. They said he's very mature, very smart. He's going to compete for a punt return job. They took tackle Blake Brandel, Oregon State. He's tough, smart, physical, can play tackle or guard. They took safety Josh Mellis out of Michigan. Started out on special teams right away. Could play both safety spots, but he's more of a box guy. Strong, physical. Rick Spielman said he could maybe be a little bit more interchangeable. Free safety, strong safety. 7th round, they took edge Kenny Willekes. This is if you were listening to the draft night, my buddy Kev was raving about this guy, and he was a big fan of this pick, Kenny Willekes. So excellent football player, plays at 1,000 miles an hour, similar to Lynch. Just rush and get after the passer. So again, they have to replace a lot of guys who left in free agency. They were in a weird cap situation, by the way. I'm going to explain that a little bit. Is that they went into free agency this year like a negative. It was a high negative too. It was like somewhere where they were over the cap by like $9 million before the start of the league year. So they needed to go ahead and clear out some cap space. They took Nate Stanley out of Iowa. He won a lot of games in the Big Ten. Underestimated athlete, good fit in the Kubiak system. They also took Brian Cole, Mississippi State, another safety. He started out at wide receiver, has great measurables, height, weight, speed guy. Another interchangeable guy, can play free safety, can play strong safety, has length and good athleticism. And then they took Kyle Hinton out of Washburn, can play tackle, small school guy. 6'2", 300 pounds, guard center, developmental guy. Ran a 4.85 at his pro day, one of the few pro days that was still allowed or around. So it sounds like they had a lot of opportunity here to add players. They made 15 picks, the most that they ever done. I think it was most by any team in a draft. So 15 picks on players, everybody. That is astounding. Just a good note, I don't know if you noticed this, but if you were watching the draft broadcast with Mike Zimmer, they had a lot of dead animals there. Apparently there's like 3 dead animals on his wall. They talked a little bit about trades up. Rick Spielman was very eager to trade up in some of these scenarios, maybe trade up to go ahead and get Jefferson. In fact, there was a rumor that they were trying to trade up to like 15 or 16 to get Jefferson, so he fell right to them. The day 2 presser, they mentioned they were filling needs, right? Day 1 and day 2, they took corner and wide receiver and offensive line, and they were going into day 3. They needed to fill out the rest of the roster. By the way, everybody, Mike Zimmer is from Kentucky. Yeah, I don't know. By the way, Mike Zimmer looks like a guy who plays like the angry dad on That 70s Show. Like, he just looks like he plays the angry dad on any show that was like a sitcom, that he's just like so disappointed in the main character, and he goes hunting all the time, or like the guy from Parks and Rec. Like, he seems like that kind of character. Like, you don't want to like go home and find out you're dating his daughter because he's got like 16 guns and like all the dead animals on the wall. But regardless, right? So I mentioned before, they traded Stephon Diggs, they tagged Anthony Harris, they cut Xavier Rhodes, Linval Joseph, Josh Klein, Everson Griffin's out. He opted out. Couple of like smaller deals. They signed Michael Pierce, formerly of the Ravens, to a 3-year, $27 million deal. That was like their biggest deal in free agency, was the Michael Pierce deal. I like that deal. That's kind of the thing that's like, hey, we missed out. We don't have a lot of pieces left. We need to get somebody next to Danielle Hunter because it's just Danielle Hunter now. So let's get Pierce in there. Griffin's not in here anymore. Maybe they can reunite with him down the line. They extended Kirk Cousins and Dan Bailey, so your kicker and your quarterback, and that's who you extended. And then they signed a couple of cheaper guys like Anthony Zettel, Tajay Sharp, guys who've traveled around the league, have had time on different rosters. This team is intriguing. I think it's a team ripened for a step back because it's going to be a lot of young pieces on the roster this year. A lot of guys trying to get up to speed. Plus, you have virtual OTAs at this point. Nothing on the field. So they're not really getting a chance to really get a lot of on the job coaching. And it doesn't feel like a team that's really adapting to the virtual reality version of the NFL very quickly. But again, like once you get into training camp and get into practices, everything will catch up to speed. But again, a lot of new pieces on the roster, right? You look at the roster, they got Kirk Cousins at quarterback. They got Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison at running back, and even Amir Abdullah and Mike Boone there on the roster as well. The receiver room is Justin Jefferson, Tajay Sharp, Adam Thielen. A lot of guys who all feel like very similar styles of player. Olabisi Johnson's there. He kind of came on a little bit last year. But there's really not else there as far as the receiver room that makes you feel very comfortable with it. Tight end, they got a couple of good tight ends, right? They got Kyle Rudolph. They got Irv Smith Sr., a junior. He's too young to be a senior. Sorry. Irv Smith Jr. Both those guys played really well last year. I think they're going to be running a lot of 2 tight end sets. Offensive line, they got Riley Reif, Pat Elflein, Garrett Bradbury, Dakota Dozer, Brian O'Neill, Drew Samia. Drew Samia, I think, is going to step up this year. I think, they drafted him last year. I think he's going to find a role in that offensive line. Garrett Bradbury played pretty well in the run game, but was not that great in pass pro. Elflein's had some issues as well as far as his development. Reif, I think this is one of the last years that they have Reif. But he's played okay. He's been basically league average left tackle. And then Brian O'Neill's come on really well for them. So overall, this offense, they're going to probably be similar to what they were last year, except they no longer have Diggs. So you no longer have the guy who you're really, truly afraid of, who has just like that ability to go up and get the ball. I think, there's some argument that Justin Jefferson can be the replacement for Diggs. I'm not saying he's totally not Diggs. He has to develop a little bit certain skills that would make him viable in that department. Because, again, he has some of the vertical ability of Diggs. So I wouldn't say he has the ability to go up and get the ball. He can run a variety of routes. It's not the same kind of route runner as Diggs. He's, again, like I said, very similar to Thielen, actually, and much better off in the slot. And Thielen is much better off as a flanker or slot himself. So offensively, I'm a little worried. I'm not worried because you still got Gary Kubiak there. You still have a decent quarterback. You still were able to make a lot of things happen last year. Whereas last year I feel like they were doing really well, though. I think they punched up way more than you were expecting, and I think it's going to be come back down to earth time for them. They couldn't beat the Bears either time they played the Bears. It was I think it's going to be a very big question mark going into this year. Looking at their defense, right? They got Danielle Hunter, Michael Pierce, Shamar Stephen. Those are the guys that are coming back that we know are good to some level. It's got Fedi Odenigbo, Anthony Zettel, Eddie Yarbo, guys who are kind of like, all right, well, you guys gotta have to show up for that 4th spot as far as defensive line goes. They drafted Willikis and Lynch, and they still have Hercules Mataafa. Maybe he develops into something. Linebacking core, they got Eric Wilson, Eric Kendricks, the Eric brothers, Anthony Barr, Eric Wilson, more Erics, man. Cam Smith, Ben Godson. They drafted Troy Dye. So linebacking core, not really worried because, again, you're playing mostly nickel in the NFL, but they tend to play a lot of base as well. Kendricks and Barr are pretty decent for that, although we've seen how that can blow up in your face if they keep them on the field. The Rams exposed them when they did that before. They safety room, they probably have the best safeties in the NFL, right? They got Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris, those two guys. You got Anthony Harrison Smith, the Super Saiyan combo when they do the fusion dance. So safety room's really good. They got an intriguing, hopefully going to take a step forward cornerback room with Holton Hill, Mike Hughes, Jeff Gladney, Chris Boyd. But especially with Dantzler and Gladney, they're coming to the NFL. They're rookies. Like, you can't expect them to be really good right away, especially with this truncated offseason. You got Mike Hughes. Okay, he's played pretty well, but Hughes has to stay healthy, and Holton Hill can't get suspended again. So overall, there's a lot of opportunity for this roster to take a step back, right? Maybe won't make a playoff run this year. They can totally do it. I just think there's a lot of factors in there that make me go, did this roster get better than it was a year ago? Not really. Like, I think, again, when we were saying before with the Texans, now the difference is they have a lot of opportunity to be better, right? They have the opportunity because they took a lot of pieces in the draft that you go, all right, they might not be better year one, but 2 years down the line, they might be better. Like, it might take some developmental time. Especially when you look at the guys who they're playing. When you're playing in that division, you got the Lions, who are basically like, we're in red zone now, right? We're basically, dead in the water if we do not perform this year. The Green Bay Packers, who, went 13-3 last year, and we're just blowing up the field. Now, granted, the Green Bay Packers have their own question marks, and we will talk about that. That's the last NFC North team, by the way, is the Green Bay Packers. And boy, is that going to be a fun one, isn't it? And then the Chicago Bears defense blew them out of the water both times. So, yes, could they beat the Chicago Bears defense? Absolutely. And again, the Chicago Bears offense has not been all that showing up lately. So they have a lot of potential to go ahead and be very good. I don't feel confident with the offensive line. I don't feel confident with the cornerback core. I don't feel confident with the wide receiver core. So there's not a lot to feel confident about, which would make me go, this is a playoff caliber team this year. I think it is a playoff caliber team next year because I think that they have pieces there. You get everybody developed and ready to go. Depends on where they play Ezra Cleveland on that roster as well. Maybe they start him at a guard, which I'm not quite sure if he really fits at guard, but maybe they try to do that. But again, I think this is a roster that is in a little bit of a transition period. I think next year they will be full-on go, but this year I would be at least slightly worried. So, again, that was the Minnesota Vikings, and then we talked about the Texans. And if you want, you can follow the podcast at Draftvice on Twitter, at Draftvice_football on Instagram. You can follow me at BROJO. Death is in the end of life. Punch like that delicious drink you drink in the summer. And please, leave a review. Rate 5 stars. Say what your favorite part of this podcast was, what your favorite team was. And, again, like, follow, subscribe, leave a comment in the comment section if you're watching this on the YouTube. If you're watching it on the YouTube, go to the iTunes and subscribe. If you're listening to this on the iTunes, go to the YouTube and subscribe, right? Y'all can, cross-pollinate everything. Like I said before, follow it on Twitter, follow it on Instagram, follow it in your heart, and good night.
When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous about the past and about the future.